The Dyatlov Pass incident, 9 experienced ski hikers, a group consisting of 8 men and 2 women, most of them students and graduates of Oral Polytechnical Institute, on February the 1st, 1959, set out on a 14-day expedition. The goal of the expedition was to reach Tartan Mountain, 1,182 meters in height and 20 kilometers or 12 miles north of the site of the incident. The route was estimated as Category 3, the most difficult. However, all the skiers were experienced in long ski tours and mountain expeditions. One of the members, Yuri Yudin, fell sick at the outset and had to return, thus avoiding the fate of the others. But he didn't have the slightest idea what happened to his comrades. Yuri Yudin died on April the 27th, 2013, at the age of 75. He maintained until his death that the Soviet military had to be involved in their deaths. Diaries and cameras found around the last camp made it possible to track the group's route up until the day preceding the incident of the mysterious deaths of the 9 hikers in the northern Ural Mountains on February the 2nd, 1959. The hike started out on February the 1st, and they'd only travelled 4 kilometres or 2.5 miles that day. Excess gear and food was stored on a platform in the forest called La Base, or camp base. Camp was set up around 5 PM on a slope of Kolaksiakl, just 16 kilometres or 10 miles from Mount Tartan. They had the dinner around 6 to 7 PM, and something went catastrophically wrong. It had been agreed beforehand that Dyatlov would send a telegram to the sports club. It was expected that this would happen no later than February the 12th, but Dyatlov had told Yuri Yudin that it expected to be longer. And so when that date passed, no message had been received. There was no immediate reaction. Delays of a few days were common in such expeditions. Only after the relatives of the travellers demanded a rescue operation did the head of the institute send the first rescue groups, consisting of volunteer students and teachers, on February the 20th. Later, the army and police forces became involved, with planes and helicopters being ordered to join the rescue operation. It wasn't until February the 26th the searchers found the abandoned and badly damaged tent on Kolaksiakl. Mikhail Sharivin, the student who found the tent, said the tent was half torn down and covered with snow. It was empty, and all the group's belongings and shoes had been left behind. Investigators said the tent had been cut open from the inside, and that the skiers had fled in socks or barefoot. A chain of 8 to 9 sets of footprints left by several people who were wearing socks, a single shoe or barefoot, could be followed and led down towards the edge of nearby woods on the opposite side of the pass, 1.5 kilometres northeast. But after 500 metres, the set of footprints disappeared, covered with snow. At the forest edge, under a large old cedar tree, the search party found the remains of a fire, along with the first 2 bodies, those of Yuri Krivoshenko and Yuri Doroshenko, shoeless and dressed only in their underwear. The branches on the tree were broken up to 5 meters high. The medical examiner recorded rigor mortis on the back, but Krivoshenko was found facing up. This indicated that someone had moved them after their death. On February the 27th, between the cedar tree and the tent, the searchers found Igor Dyatlov, 300 meters from the cedar tree, and Zinaida Golmogorova, 630 metres from the cedar. And 6 days later, on March the 5th, Rustem Slobodin, 480 metres from the cedar. The three seem to have died in poses suggesting they were attempting to return to the tent. A medical examiner found no injuries which might have led to their deaths, and it was concluded they died of hypothermia. Rustem Slobodin had a small crack in his skull, but it was not thought to be a fatal wound. A legal inquest started immediately after finding the first 5 bodies. Searching for the remaining 4 hikers took more than 2 months. They were finally found on May the 5th, under 4 metres of snow in a ravine, 50 metres farther into the woods from the cedar tree. These 4 were better dressed than the others, and there were signs that those who had died first had apparently relinquished their clothes to the others. Tibor Brignol was wearing Dubinina's fur coat and hat. Dubinina's was wearing a brown sweater that tested radioactive. Zolotaryov had Doroshenko's hat, and Kolovatov was wearing Doroshenko's overalls. The waistband of his sweat and lower part of his ski trousers tested radioactive. An examination of the 4 bodies found in May changed the whole course of the investigation. 3 of them had fatal injuries. The body of Tibor Brignol had major skull damage, and both Dubinina and Zolotaryov had major chest fractures. Notably, the bodies had no external wounds, as if they were crippled by a high level of pressure. Dubinina was found to be missing her tongue. The group clearly realised the threats and did everything they could to preserve themselves. They'd managed to dig out a den in the snow, lay it down with branches in an effort to keep themselves warm. But bizarrely, bodies were actually found a few feet from their improvised shelter in the deep part of the ravine, on the area of only 4 metres squared. Some of the clothes taken from the bodies underneath the cedar tree were placed on the cedar branches, but apparently they were not used. Immediately after the incident, and right up until the present day, numerous theories have been suggested for the cause of the 9 hikers' unfortunate deaths. As you will see, some of these sound plausible, but don't completely fit with all the collected evidence from the incident. Others seem totally implausible. I'll leave you to decide which, if any of them, you believe to be the real cause of the Dyatlov Pass incident. The avalanche theory. This theory was ultimately, on July the 20th, 2020, the conclusion of Russia's new and final investigation into the incident. However, the area is not avalanche prone. Kholat Sayako is not tall, and it is certainly not very steep. Furthermore, the opponents of this theory suggest that hikers' diaries report a fairly thin snow cover. Lightning. This theory describes how the 2 deaths at the Cedar were due to a single electrocution event, and the subsequent 4 deaths in the ravine due to an explosion event near the den. Again, due to more powerful lightning strike or ball lightning. Although cold weather lightning is rare, it is possible. Police officer Lev Ivanov, who led the official request in 1959, apparently favoured the fireball theory. Hurricane. This theory was favoured by the Central Committee of the CPSU, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Proceedings that took place on March the 27th, 1959, concluded, as a result of their own investigation, that the immediate cause of the death of the group was a strong hurricane, which caught them while approaching Mount Ortorton. Kubatic wind. The kubatic wind derives from the Greek word katabasis, which means descending. This definition of a kubatic wind is sometimes also referred to as a fall wind. Since cooled air has a higher density than the surrounding atmosphere, a kubatic wind can sometimes accelerate to the force of a hurricane. The strongest of these winds are usually found on drops surrounding mighty ice sheets, but can also occur over cold mountain areas, similar to the topography surrounding the Dyatlov Pass. In most places where the phenomenon appears, it usually does so at night when the temperature drops. An interesting note in the Dyatlov group diary, made a short period of time before the incident, described a relatively warm wind associated to a jet engine. The wind was blowing from the valley below under a blue sky. This could potentially have laid the foundation for the unfortunate events that unfolded between the 1st and 2nd of February 1959. Infrasound. There have been suggestions that an infrasound might have been responsible for sudden unpleasant feelings among the hikers. A wind phenomenon called a Karen vortex streak could have produced a terrifying, powerful sound, which is proven to induce irrational fear in humans. Due to the unique topography of the area, which is a perfect dome shape, the fierce winds that blow through the pass could have been warped as they struck the blunt surface. The wind, which was blown in a straight line, would be twisted into a series of small but powerful tornadoes which would tear down either side of the pass. Under certain circumstances, they could also produce a subtle and terrifying phenomenon known as infrasound, the opposite of ultrasound. Infrasound is a type of vibration in the air which has a frequency so low it cannot be picked up by the human ear. But a succession of studies have shown that it can have marked effects on the human body, including loss of sleep, shortness of breath, and extreme dread. This theory believes that the combination of the effects on infrasound, the deafening noise of tornadoes, and the claustrophobic pitch black tent could have unseated even the most steady-minded adventurer. Gravity fluctuation. Russian scientists believe that the hikers came to the area where, under certain conditions, the force of gravity can fluctuate. Petersburg physicist, PhD, Associate Professor of the Institute of Engineering, and holder of more than 100 patents, German Urchenko, believes that the significantly decreased external pressure threw the hikers out from their tent. Another theory is animals attacking or tripping over the tent, like an adult deer which can weigh 100 to 200 kilograms, a wolverine, known for their fierce and cruel temper, a bear, of which a fully grown adult bear can weigh 350 to 500 kilograms. Yeti or snowman. One highly controversial and implausible theory is they were attacked by a Yeti. This photo is most likely a blurred image of one of the hikers wearing clothes, as the photo taken on Tibor Brignol's camera shows. The stove. This theory suggests that the hikers left the tent due to a smoke from the stove. The problem with this theory is that they wouldn't need to go a mile down the hill to escape smoke in the tent. Even if they thought it could be a fire in the tent, they wouldn't need to go so far from it. They could easily put it down with plenty of snow around, and easily remedied by opening the tent up and ventilating. Lev Ivanov, a man who was in charge of the investigation of the Dyatlov Pass, lived a long life. In the early 1990s, in an interview to a local journalist, he made a statement that during his investigation, he and E.P. Maslenkov both noticed that the pines in the forest were burned at the top. He also claims that A.P. Kirilenko, member of the Soviet Congress, along with his advisor, forced Ivanov to take out any reference to unknown flying objects or any other strange phenomena. Surprisingly, one of the most extraordinary and astonishing versions came from none other than Lev Ivanov himself. In 1990, the retired prosecutor published an article, The Enigma of the Fireballs, where he admitted that in the spring of 1959, under the pressure of A.P. Krylenkov and of his deputy A.F. Yestokin, he withdrew various key materials from the case that indicated the true cause of the accident, fireballs or a UFO. When E.P. Maskalenkov and I examined the scene in May, we found that some young pine trees at the edge of the forest had burn marks, but those marks did not have a concentric form or some other pattern. There's no epicenter. This once again confirmed that heated beams of a strong but completely unknown, at least to us, energy were directing the firepower downwards towards specific objects, in this case people, acting selectively. It is worth noting that later on, Krylenko professed a lively interest in UFOs and received memos about sightings of unidentified objects from the chairman of the KGB, Andropov. 66 years later, only questions remain. What force terrified them so deeply they ripped through their only shelter? What left traces no avalanche ever could? The mountain keeps its secrets for now. This is the 13th transmission. Thank you for listening. We expose the forbidden. Comment your theory. What truly happened on Dead Mountain?